Aquarius, welcome back, beautiful souls. I'm so happy you're here. As always, take what resonates and simply leave behind what doesn't. Before we begin, thank you for your time, your energy, and your presence. Truly, it means more than you know. Okay, Aquarius, the moment I started connecting with your energy, something felt different. Not loud, not dramatic, just impossible to ignore. And honestly, it feels like someone has spent a very long time trying to ignore what their heart has been saying. I have to say, this person comes through as somebody who usually trusts logic more than feelings. The type of person who likes answers, explanations, evidence. They want everything to make sense before they allow themselves to believe it. But emotions don't always work that way, do they? Because the more they tried to explain this connection away, the more it stayed with them. The more they tried to move forward, the more something kept pulling their attention back towards you. And as I'm saying that, the Four of Swords card is sitting here. It's interesting, because it feels like somebody thought distance would solve the problem. They thought silence would settle everything down. They thought time would make these feelings disappear. Yet every attempt to create space somehow brought them closer to the truth. You know what's interesting? I don't actually feel panic around this person. I feel exhaustion. The exhaustion that comes from carrying around feelings you've been trying to suppress. The exhaustion of pretending something doesn't matter when deep down you know it does. Because this person has been having conversations with themselves that nobody else knows about. Late drives, quiet mornings, moments where they're sitting alone and your name suddenly crosses their mind for no reason. Or at least that's what they tell themselves. No reason. But there is a reason, and I think they're starting to realize that. Okay, the energy shifts right here. Because the Judgment card appears and everything suddenly feels louder. Not on the outside, inside. It's like something is waking up, something they've been postponing. Something they've been avoiding. I keep hearing the phrase, I can't keep telling myself that anymore. Whatever story they were using to protect themselves, whatever explanation they created, it's becoming harder to believe because the truth keeps showing up. And the truth has your energy attached to it. I think this person genuinely believed they could compartmentalize what they felt, put it on a shelf, focus on work, focus on responsibilities, focus on everything else. But feelings have a strange way of resurfacing when they're real. Especially when they're connected to someone who left a lasting impression. And Aquarius, you left an impression. Maybe more than you realize. Because what keeps coming through is not obsession, it's recognition. There's a difference. This person is beginning to recognize your place in their life. They're beginning to understand why certain memories still feel alive. Why certain conversations still echo. Why they compare people to you without even meaning to. Why your absence feels different from everyone else's absence. And honestly, I don't think they expected that. The Star card is here now. And the moment it appears, the energy softens. Everything slows down. I suddenly feel someone looking back. Not necessarily at the relationship. Not necessarily at what happened. But at you. At who you were. At what you brought into their life. Your kindness. Your honesty. Your uniqueness. The way you saw things differently. The way you challenged them without trying to. The way being around you made them question parts of themselves they had ignored for years. I have to be honest. I think this person admired you long before they fully understood their feelings. I think they respected you before they admitted they missed you. And now those emotions are starting to merge together. Because admiration alone doesn't explain why you're still on their mind. Respect alone doesn't explain why they keep replaying conversations. And attraction alone definitely doesn't explain why they keep wondering how you redoing. Something deeper is happening. Something they're finally allowing themselves to look at. And I think that's the uncomfortable part. Not the feelings themselves. The fact that they can no longer pretend the feelings aren't there. Because once you acknowledge something, you can't unknow it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly where this person feels to be right now. Standing between what they used to believe and what they're beginning to accept. I keep seeing somebody staring at their phone. Not necessarily typing, not necessarily calling, just staring, thinking, replaying scenarios. Wondering what would happen if they finally said what they've been holding back. Wondering if too much time has passed. Wondering if you'd even want to hear it. And yet, despite all those questions, I don't feel them moving away from the truth anymore. I feel them moving toward it, slowly, carefully, maybe even reluctantly, but still moving. Because whatever this realization is, it didn't happen overnight. It was built through distance, built through silence, built through every moment they thought they were fine and suddenly realized they weren't. And Aquarius. I don't think this story starts with a phone call. I think the phone call starts with a realization. a realization that's becoming harder and harder for this person to ignore. And as I look at these cards together, it feels like they're only beginning to understand where that realization is about to lead them. Because the energy changes the moment the Eight of Wands card touches the table. I actually felt it before I saw it. You know that feeling when somebody has been holding their breath for so long that eventually they have to let it out? That's what this feels like. Something inside this person is reaching a point where silence feels heavier than speaking. And honestly, I don't think that's a comfortable realization for them. Because this is someone who has spent a long time convincing themselves that they could carry these feelings privately, that they could keep everything contained, organized, controlled. Yet every time they try to put distance between themselves and what they're feeling, something pulls them right back. A memory, a song, a random thought, a conversation they wish had gone differently. The energy feels restless, like there are words sitting in their chest that have nowhere left to go. And Aquarius, I have to be honest, what keeps coming through isn't guilt, it's vulnerability. There's a difference, because guilt says I did something wrong. Vulnerability says, I need you to see something I've been hiding. And that feels much closer to what's happening here. The King of Cups card is sitting quietly beside the Eight of Wands, and the contrast between those two energies is fascinating. One part of this person wants to remain composed, collected, mature, the version of themselves that appears unaffected, the version that seems to have everything figured out. But another part of them is tired of carrying emotions they never fully expressed, tired of pretending certain feelings don't matter, tired of acting as though your presence didn't change something inside them. You know what's interesting? I don't think their biggest fear is rejection. I think their biggest fear is exposure. Because once they say it out loud, it becomes real. Once they admit it, they can't retreat back into uncertainty. And that's what makes this feel so significant. There is something they want you to know. Something they've been editing every time they imagined the conversation. Changing the words. Rehearsing different versions. Starting over. Stopping halfway through. I keep seeing somebody drafting a message and deleting it. Not because they don't know what to say. Because they care too much about how it's received. And that's a very different energy. The Ace of Cups card just shifted everything for me. The atmosphere softened immediately, almost like somebody finally lowering their defenses. I keep hearing, I should have told you sooner. Not necessarily about love, not necessarily about commitment, just the truth, the honest truth. The part they protected behind sarcasm, distance, distractions, responsibilities, or whatever wall they built around themselves. Because I don't think this person was intentionally trying to be difficult. I think they were trying to protect something they didn't understand. And the unfortunate thing about that is sometimes people end up protecting themselves from the very thing they want most. This person feels aware of that, more aware than they used to be. There is a sadness around that realization, not dramatic sadness, quiet sadness, the kind that shows up when you're sitting alone and suddenly understand how different things could have been if you had simply said what was in your heart. Okay, this is getting deeper, because I don't feel like they want to explain themselves in order to be forgiven. I feel like they want to explain themselves because they want to be understood. There are things that happen behind the scenes that you may never have fully seen. Battles they were fighting internally. Confusion they couldn't put into words. Moments where they genuinely didn't know what to do with what they felt. And the strange thing is, the more they tried to figure it out logically, the less sense it made. Some feelings aren't solved. They're acknowledged. And I think that's exactly what this person is learning. The Ace of Cups feels almost emotional here. Like somebody looking at a truth they've avoided and realizing it's still there, still waiting, still alive. Not because they planned it, not because they wanted it to stay, because it simply never left. Aquarius, your energy feels surprisingly present in this person's life. Even during periods where communication felt absent, even during periods where they appeared detached. It's almost like there was a conversation continuing beneath the surface the entire time, not spoken, not visible, but happening nonetheless. And I keep feeling this urge to clear something up, because whatever they eventually want to say, it doesn't feel polished. It doesn't feel perfect. In fact, it feels messy, human, emotional. The kind of conversation where somebody pauses halfway through because they weren't expecting their own emotions to catch up with them. The kind of conversation where they start by talking about practical things and somehow end up revealing what was really on their heart all along. I actually feel nervousness coming through them. Which is interesting because this person doesn't strike me as somebody who gets nervous easily. Yet your energy affects them differently. It always has. There's a level of honesty required here that makes them uncomfortable. Not because they don't want to tell the truth, because they've spent so much time avoiding it. And the closer they get to speaking it, the harder it becomes to ignore how much is actually at stake emotionally. I keep seeing someone staring out a window, thinking, reflecting, trying to decide whether it's finally time, not because all the answers have appeared, not because everything suddenly became simple, because carrying it alone is becoming harder than sharing it. And the feeling sitting underneath all of this, the feeling they may struggle to put into words, seems to be growing stronger every time they stop running from it. Because the atmosphere around this person feels completely different from what it once did. Not perfect, not finished, just different. You know what's this interesting? I don't actually feel them looking at you right now. I feel them looking at themselves. And for somebody who spent a long time focusing on everything outside of themselves, that shift feels significant. The Hermit card is here, and the moment it appeared, the room felt quieter, not lonely, reflective, like somebody who finally stopped running long enough to hear their own thoughts. I keep seeing someone sitting with questions they used to avoid. Questions about their choices, their patterns, the reasons they reacted the way they did, the reasons they pulled away when they wanted closeness, the reasons they stayed silent when they wanted to speak. Because sometimes people think growth happens when life gets louder, but honestly, this feels like growth that happened in the silence. The kind nobody applauds, the kind nobody sees, the kind that happens behind closed doors. And I have to be honest. I think this person went through a period where they felt stripped of certainty. Things that once made sense stopped making sense. People they once trusted disappointed them. Beliefs they once relied on began falling apart. It's almost like life stopped allowing them to hide inside old versions of themselves. And that's where the Death card comes in. Not dramatically, not suddenly. More like a slow realization that certain parts of their life could no longer continue the way they had before. I keep hearing, I can't do this anymore. Not about the connection, about themselves. About habits they were tired of repeating. About fears that kept making decisions for them. About emotional walls that had become prisons without them realizing it. Because here's the thing. Some people think they're protecting themselves, but eventually they realize they're also limiting themselves. And that realization feels deeply personal for this person. There are parts of themselves they don't recognize anymore. The version of them that always needed control. The version of them that refused vulnerability. The version of them that convinced themselves they didn't need anyone. Something about that energy feels weaker now. Not because they're broken, because they're becoming honest. Honestly, that's the strongest thing coming through. Honesty. Not just with you, with themselves. And Aquarius, I think you've unknowingly been part of that process. Not because you tried to change them. Actually, the opposite. You showed up as yourself. And sometimes being seen by the right person forces them to confront parts of themselves they've ignored. The energy feels uncomfortable at times. Like somebody cleaning out a room that's been locked for years. Dust everywhere. Old memories. Things they forgot they were carrying. But also relief. Because once the room is open, fresh air can finally enter. Okay. Temperance just caught my attention, and the energy shifts again. The pressure softens, the urgency settles. Something feels calmer here, more balanced. I keep feeling somebody learning patience, learning that not everything can be forced. Not every answer appears immediately. Not every wound heals overnight. This person feels less reactive than they used to, less defensive, less interested in proving themselves right, and more interested in understanding. That's a huge difference. Because I don't think they spent this time apart simply waiting. I think they were changing, slowly, quietly, maybe even reluctantly. But changing nonetheless. There is something beautiful about that. Because genuine transformation rarely announces itself. It happens through small moments, a different choice, a difficult conversation, an apology that finally feels sincere, a boundary, a realization, a decision to stop repeating the same cycle one more time. I keep seeing this image of somebody looking at an old photograph, not because they want to go back, because they suddenly see it differently. They notice details they missed. They understand things they didn't understand before. And honestly, that's exactly how this person feels when they think about the connection. The perspective has changed. The lens has changed, which means the conclusions are changing too. There is something else here. I feel humility, and that's not a word that comes through often. This person seems far less certain that they had all the answers, far less convinced that they understood everything. Life has been teaching them something, and whatever that lesson was, it appears to have softened parts of them that once felt rigid. Even their energy feels different, less guarded, less sharp, more open, more willing to sit with uncomfortable truths instead of immediately escaping them. I think that's why they're beginning to understand things they couldn't understand before. Because growth creates new perspectives, and new perspectives reveal things that were invisible before. The Hermit card keeps pulling my attention back, almost as if this period of reflection isn't completely over. There's still more unfolding, still more clarity arriving, still more pieces falling into place. But the person standing here feels very different from the one who first entered this journey, not because they've become someone else, because they've become more themselves, more authentic, more aware, more willing to acknowledge what matters. And as these cards sit together, I keep feeling the sense that this transformation wasn't happening for no reason. It feels connected to something larger, as though every uncomfortable realization, every difficult lesson, every moment of solitude has been quietly preparing this person for a conversation they weren't ready to have before. And honestly, the closer they get to becoming this newer version of themselves, the harder it becomes to pretend that conversation isn't waiting for them, because something about this energy feels far more grounded than I expected. Honestly, when I first connected to it, I thought this was going to be entirely emotional. Feelings, realizations, reflection. But the cards sitting here tell a different story. The Ace of Pentacles has a weight to it, not heavy, solid, and that's what keeps coming through. This person is no longer asking themselves what they feel. They're asking themselves what they're willing to do about it. You know what's interesting? There comes a point where emotions alone stop being enough, not because the feelings disappear, because feelings eventually start asking for action. And I think that's where this person finds themselves. I keep getting the image of somebody standing in front of a doorway, not rushing through it, just standing there, looking at it, knowing they can no longer pretend it isn't there, because crossing that threshold would require commitment, effort, consistency, things that sound simple until they're attached to something that genuinely matters. And Aquarius, for whatever reason, this connection feels important enough to make them think differently about those things. The Hierophant appears and the atmosphere changes again. Everything becomes quieter, more intentional. I don't feel impulsiveness. I don't feel somebody acting on a temporary emotion. What I feel is consideration, thoughtfulness, a desire to approach something correctly. I have to be honest. This person feels very aware of how much their actions matter right now, more than their words, more than explanations, more than promises. Because words can be spoken in a moment. Actions require time, and I think they understand that. There is almost a seriousness around them. Not the kind that feels cold, the kind that comes from somebody realizing that if they truly value something, they need to show up differently. I keep hearing, what can I actually offer? Not in a material sense, in a real sense. Can they be present? Can they be consistent? Can they be honest? Can they create something that doesn't disappear the moment life becomes complicated? These questions feel important to them, more important than they used to be. And honestly, I think that's part of the reason things feel different. Because they're no longer looking at this connection through the lens of fantasy. They're looking at it through the lens of reality. And surprisingly, that doesn't seem to scare them. It seems to draw them closer. The Ace of Pentacles keeps pulling my attention back. There is something about beginnings here, not necessarily the dramatic beginning, not a movie scene, not fireworks, something simpler, something real, a conversation, a meeting, a coffee, a phone call that lasts longer than expected, a willingness to start somewhere. Because this person appears to understand that meaningful things are built one step at a time. And that's exactly what makes this energy feel so different. Okay, the Six of Pentacles just shifted the feeling again. There is a desire for balance here, a genuine desire. Not because they want everything to be perfect, because they want things to feel fair. I think this person has spent a lot of time thinking about what they contributed in the past, what they didn't contribute, where they showed up, where they didn't, and whether certain situations left you carrying more than your share of the emotional weight. That awareness feels significant, because I don't feel defensiveness attached to it. I feel accountability, quiet accountability, the kind that doesn't need an audience, the kind that develops when somebody is finally honest with themselves. You know what keeps surprising me? The tenderness underneath all of this. Because from the outside, this person may appear practical, reserved, maybe even difficult to read. But underneath that, I keep finding somebody who cares more deeply than they allowed themselves to admit. And caring creates responsibility. That's what this energy feels like. Responsibility, not obligation, not pressure, choice, a conscious decision to approach something differently. I keep seeing somebody imagining what it would be like to spend actual time with you again. Not the version that exists in memory. The version that exists right now. The person you've become, the life you're living, the experiences you've had. There is curiosity there. But there's also admiration, because I don't think they believe you've stood still during this period. They know you've grown. And strangely enough, that realization doesn't intimidate them. It motivates them. It makes them want to meet you where you are, rather than expecting you to return to where things once were. That's actually beautiful because it feels mature. It feels like somebody understanding that connections don't survive by recreating the past. They survive by creating something new. And that's exactly what keeps appearing in these cards. Not repetition, construction, building, creating, establishing. The Hierophant and the Ace of Pentacles together feel almost symbolic of somebody wanting stronger foundations than before. Not because what existed wasn't meaningful, because meaningful things deserve support. They deserve effort. They deserve structure. And this person seems increasingly aware of that. I keep feeling them move away from uncertainty and toward intention. Not rushing, not forcing. Just becoming clearer about what they actually want. And the more clarity arrives, the more practical their thoughts become. Because suddenly they're not only wondering what they feel, they're wondering how to make room for it, how to create space for it, how to show it, how to nurture it, how to protect it. And honestly, the energy around this connection feels like it's approaching a moment where thoughts are no longer enough on their own, where intentions quietly begin looking for a way to become reality. Because the moment the Tower card appears, I can feel why this energy has been building for so long. And honestly, I don't think the surprise is the communication itself. I think the surprise is what finally gets said. You know what's interesting? Sometimes we spend so much time preparing for an apology that we forget there may be something underneath it. Something deeper. Something far more personal. And that's exactly what this feels like. The Tower card isn't arriving with chaos here. It's arriving with honesty. The kind of honesty that changes the atmosphere the second it enters the room. I keep feeling somebody reaching a point where they can no longer hide behind carefully chosen words. No more rehearsed explanations. No more safe answers. No more pretending they only care a little. Because whatever walls once protected them seem to be falling away one by one. And I have to be honest, I think that terrifies them. Not because they're afraid of you, because they're afraid of being fully seen. There is something vulnerable about this energy. Extremely vulnerable. The kind of vulnerability that makes somebody's heart race before they pick up the phone. The kind that makes them stare at a message for 20 minutes before pressing send. The kind that makes them question every sentence because what they're really trying to communicate feels much bigger than language. And Aquarius, the feeling I keep getting is that this person wants you to understand them. Not the version they've shown the world. Not the version that stayed detached. Not the version that appeared unaffected. The real version. The one they've spent years protecting. The one they've spent years hiding. The one that actually feels things much more deeply than anyone realizes. The Star card is glowing so strongly right now, it's almost impossible to ignore. And what fascinates me about it is that it feels connected to hope. Not wishful thinking, not fantasy. Hope. The kind that quietly survives even when people stop talking. The kind that continues existing in the background while life keeps moving. I think this person carried that hope longer than they admitted, maybe even to themselves. Because there is a strange tenderness attached to your energy. Whenever they think about you, everything softens. Their defenses soften. Their certainty softens. Even their fears seem to lose some of their power. You know what's interesting? I don't think they expected you to leave such a lasting mark on their life. I really don't. I think they assumed time would eventually erase the emotional impact. That eventually they would stop thinking about certain conversations, certain moments, certain memories. But instead, something very different happened. The distance gave those memories room to breathe. And the more space they had, the clearer everything became. The Star card feels almost like a light they've been following without realizing it. A quiet reminder that some connections don't disappear simply because circumstances become complicated. Some connections remain present because they mattered. And that realization appears to have changed this person in ways they're only beginning to understand. Okay, the Sun card just shifted the entire energy again. Everything suddenly feels warmer, lighter, more open. Like somebody stepping out from underneath, a shadow they've been standing in for a very long time. I keep hearing, I don't want to hide anymore. Not hide their feelings, not hide their intentions, not hide what this connection means to them. And honestly, that may be the biggest surprise of all, because Aquarius may expect an apology, an explanation, a conversation about the past. But what keeps coming through feels bigger than that. It feels like somebody finally choosing authenticity. Somebody finally deciding that the truth is worth the risk. Even if their voice shakes, even if they're nervous, even if they don't know exactly how everything will be received. Because there comes a point where protecting yourself starts costing more than opening your heart. And I think this person has reached that point. I keep seeing them sitting alone before the conversation happens. Maybe driving, maybe walking, maybe lying awake thinking. And there's this moment where they stop negotiating with themselves. They stop trying to find a way around the truth. They stop searching for safer words. And instead, they simply accept it. Accept what they feel. Accept what they want. Accept what they've been afraid to say. That acceptance feels powerful, not dramatic, peaceful. Like somebody putting down a burden they've carried for too long. The Tower card, the Star card, and the Sun card together create such an unusual atmosphere because none of it feels forced. None of it feels manipulated. It feels genuine. And genuine energy always has a different texture. You can feel it. You can sense it. There is no performance attached to it, only sincerity. And sincerity is exactly what keeps showing up again and again, almost as though the universe is pulling every unnecessary layer away so that only the truth remains. I think that's why this reading feels so emotional, not because of what happened, not because of what was lost, because of what is finally being acknowledged. A feeling, a realization, a truth that spent a very long time waiting in the background. And as I sit with this energy, I can't help but feel that whatever words eventually come out of this person's mouth, they won't be coming from the version of them that existed before. They'll be coming from someone who has spent a long time learning what matters, what doesn't, and what they're no longer willing to leave unsaid. I keep feeling that whatever is unfolding here, it's asking everyone involved to be a little more honest, a little more open, and a little more willing to trust what they've been feeling all along. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. Not with certainty, not with perfect timing, just with truth. That's all I've got for you for this reading. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your energy, your kindness, and for allowing me to read for you today. You all mean a lot, and I never take your presence here for granted. Take care of yourselves, Aquarius. And remember, no matter where you are on your journey, keep choosing what feels genuine to your heart. I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, bye.